Hello, my name is Karen Duraza. I'm a student from industrial engineering, and I'm going to present to you my research proposal. This is for investigation workshop 1, and here we go. First of all, what are we going to see in this presentation? We're going to see the statement of the problem of this research, the rationale and significance, scope and limitations, review of literature, objectives, the work schedule, the methodology, and the reference taken into account for the creation of this research. Okay, so for this research, we actually took into account the sleep deprivation. There have been several research studies regarding sleep deprivation and its effects after only one day of not sleeping the recommended hours and after prolonged time of doing it. Therefore, we understand that having a good night's sleep is relevant. However, a large amount of the adult population has not a good regimen of sleeping, which can lead to the loss of focus, fatigue, irritability, and the amplification of negative emotions. Although these are well-known results linked to sleep deprivation, it is important for the industrial field to fulfill a research over this exact area to further understand the importance of sleep in regards of the effectivity, productivity, and overall the effects, negative or positive, of the current sleeping schedule of the workers involved in a manufacturing plant, which can lead to consequential results on the production. By this means that we have a title, and therefore our title is the statistic research on the relation between sleep deprivation over the productivity and effectiveness within work hours in the industrial field in comparison to other non-industrial fields. So why? The statement of the problem is, what is the missing gap of the information? It is known that the estimated hours for a good rest is between 7 to 9 hours of sleep. However, the estimated 30% of civilian employed U.S. adults, which are approximately 40.56 million workers, have mentioned to have an average sleep duration being less or equal to 6 hours per day, which are 2 or 3 hours less than the recommended one. This is according to National Health Interview Survey in 2010. And why is this so important? It is known that the estimated hours can affect you greatly. And one of these statistics calculated that works in the manufacturing department had a higher currency to short sleep duration with a 34% from the almost 40.6 million workers mentioned. Short sleep duration is associated with various adverse health effects, for example, cardiovascular disease or obesity. This means that if you are constantly working in a manufacturing and sleeping less hours than recommended, you can actually get these illnesses for working. And this is really bad for everyone, actually. This means that even if we don't have a great percentage of deviation between the effectiveness and productivity of workers according to their sleep schedules, there is still a chance of a greater cost being harvested as the probability of having a higher rate of diseases and illnesses in the plant can grow higher. It is the purpose of this research to determine the current state of workers within the industrial field and the relation between sleep regarding the effectiveness and productivity to determine if the enterprises should take more into consideration sleep deprivation and schedules into their hygiene and safety department within the region of Sonora, more specifically, enterprises within the city of Hermosillo. This is due to the fact that, as the title has mentioned, this is going to be a statistical comparison between the working fields. So this is to analyze the difference between those numbers in the sleeping deprivation and the effects within working hours. Then we have the rational significance. Why is this so important? The investigation is important as to collect enough information to decide where or not should these hours of rest be taken in consideration for further analysis in enterprises, as the results can have effects on a production's line quality. Also, these results will be important in an ergonomic approach to take into account in an enterprise, as it is closely related to the personal's condition and productivity as to create restrictions within the manufacturing or any service field. The scope and limitations. The scope goes from 200 people older than 24 and from Hermosillo, as the scope taken into consideration in the research of this topic will be think of as wide due to the fact of the methodology involved, which will be surveys directed to adult working civilians, as I have mentioned, as the objectives of this research is to compare the productivity and effectiveness effects of the industrial field to the others. This involves others working fields as education, business affairs, among others. This will be solved by classifying the responses into different categories according to the data we want to obtain from the service. In this research, there are some limitations and constraints involved. The first one is related to the information gathered. As the data required for this investigation needs to be from Mexico, it is hard to find national researches and surveys related to sleep deprivation and its effects on the industrial field and others. Next, the methodology involved is not varied enough to give varied result of the research. This means there are not enough ways to explore different angles of this topic, as the access to people knowledgeable of this topic is limited. Therefore, an exhaustive investigation into people who will possibly know about this topic by expertise should be conducted and raise the awareness of the importance of sleep deprivation, so enterprises will allow further access to implement the research. This means the surveys being implemented in enterprises. Review of literature. What has been researched? A research was presented in 2010 where the results compared with the risk and good sleep groups, insomnia and insufficient sleep syndrome groups had significantly worse productivity, performance, and safety outcomes. Fatigue-related productivity losses were estimated to cause 1,967 employees annually. This is how of an effect can have an enterprise when their employees are sleep deprived. And although this is a study from the United States, we want to employ it to our region, which is Hermosillo, in order to give us information about sleep deprivation and effectiveness and productivity, and therefore have something to research on here nationally, not widely nationally, but regionally, more interested in. Which are the objectives? The general objective of this research is to identify the consequences of sleep deprivation over the effectiveness and productivity within labor hours in different work fields. The specific objectives are to assess the knowledge and practice over sleep deprivation and its effects within distinct work fields. The second one is to determine if sleep schedules should be taken more into account within different work fields, to identify factors owned by the employees of different work areas which impacts positively or negatively the effectiveness and productivity according to sleep deprivation's consequences. To compare the given results in order to identify the differences over effectiveness and productivity in relation to sleep deprivation between different sectors of labor. As for our work schedule, we have the presentation of research proposals, selection of research, identification of the problem, corrections of the research proposal with identified problem, and to assess importance or justification of the research. And as we can see, we have a Gantt diagram to identify these activities within the months taken to do this. And it follows by the identification of the scope and limitations of the study, the data collection from reliable sources to complete the review of literature in order to give a context to the study, establish the general objective of the study, settle the specific objectives of the study, and ascertain the work schedule of the research. Of course, if the research goes along, the work schedule will be bigger and more activities are going to be arranged within this work schedule. Methodology. How is the research going to be made? A sample of 200 people, employees, most actually, within the age of 24 and 70 are going to be selected these employees within any working field like industrial or public sectors. This is due to the fact that the research requires to have different working fields in order to compare the results within these areas and have a more precise conclusion. Data study. There are some limitations in the study that includes the access to personnel in industrial fields, as this can be difficult to achieve, and more logically in larger enterprises. References. Where was the information retrieved? So these are all the links to the information I could gather about sleep deprivation. It goes from the parts of the brain involved in the process of sleeping to the amount of money that an enterprise can lose by having sleep deprivation in their employees. These are the other links. And thank you a lot. It has been fun to search about this topic because it is an interesting topic, and it is actually very important. I can see where I work that they take into account the hours of sleep, the fatigue of the brain, and it is all really involved into the productivity and effectiveness you have in a production line, or whether it is a customer or a product. It is important to have well-rested employees. A picture is worth than 1,000 words, and here are some of the pages of my research in paper, and you can read it out in my homework assignments. That's it for me, and thank you so much, teacher, for having us do this research. I really had fun, and it is a really interesting research for me. Thank you so much, and hope you like it.